Hello everyone, and welcome to Order, the place where we answer questions that nobody asked. If I could describe ULTRAKILL in a single word, it would be fast. Just thinking about all of the different movement possibilities gives me a seizure. We're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the opposite. What if you couldn't do all of that? What if we got rid of our main way of movement? What if we could beat ULTRAKILL without WASD? In order to address some of the comments from my previous video, including this guy who wrote an entire essay about why I'm bullshit, I will be starting from a fresh save. The run will be played on the current hardest difficulty, Violent, and just like last time, cheats and major assists are disabled, since I like my challenge runs to be, challenging. With that, I unbound WASD, made my way through the tutorial with minimal issues, and dropped directly down into the fire.
Prelude is normally very easy, so I figured that I should just be able to breeze through these levels and oh, you've gotta be kidding. Lesson learned. Always play cautiously. Shortly thereafter, I learned another lesson, this time in stamina. My only way of moving midair is dashing, and since I only have a maximum of 3 dashes before I run out of stamina, wall jumping up walls is pretty much impossible. I died one more time before remembering to play cautiously, and made my way through the rest of the level with no issues. I died once here to slow motion, but other than that, the level went the same as it normally would. 0-3 was mostly the same as 0-2. I only died once due to accidentally sliding into this fan. The Swords Machine fight was a bit difficult, but I've done the fight enough times to where it wasn't a problem. I died 3 times in 0-4, first to the filth, then to the fan, and finally to the strays, before taking it slowly and beating the level. Cerberus is usually the hardest part of Prelude, so I expected the fight to be very difficult, and never mind, I beat him.
Aside from consistently fumbling with the skull and dying once to a kamikaze drone, there is not a whole lot to talk up here about 1-1. 1-2 is much of the same. Aside from the fact that I P-ranked it, there's nothing interesting to talk about here. I could have used the speedrun skip here to instantly skip to the Hideous Mass fight, but I knew I wouldn't be satisfied with that. So I decided to beat the level the intended way. Even after a multitude of near-death experiences, I actually only died twice in 1-3. Once in the final room of the Red Path, and once to the Hideous Mass. The trick that speedrunners use in 1-4 in order to beat V2 before the fight even begins. But for the purposes of this challenge, that just feels like cheating. Going into this challenge, I thought that V2 would be a lot more difficult, but it's actually not that bad. The trick here is to play defensively. Stand still, keep track of V2, and always make sure to parry his attacks. Moving around after him will just get you killed. Parrying also serves a double purpose. Aside from doing a lot of damage, it also heals you. This health means that even if you miss a parry, as long as you land another one, you'll be fine. With this in mind, I was able to beat V2 with only 2 deaths. 2-1 was challenging. Not because of any enemies per se, but more so platforming. Look, to be honest, I already suck at 3D platformers enough. Getting rid of WASD doesn't exactly help in that department. Despite that, I was still able to beat 2-1 with only 1 death. 2-2 was significantly easier than 2-1. It had a lot less platforming and an overall easier objective, meaning that I could get another P rank. Aside from giving me flashbacks to Prelude and dying twice in the second room, there's not much to talk about here in 2-3. Except for one thing. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to take a short rant about Mind Flayers. In short, I don't like them. They have a ton of health for a common enemy. They can fly around. They spam projectiles. And worst of all, they can teleport. Combine all of that with the inability to move using WASD, and you've got yourselves a recipe for disaster. With that rant out of the way, I just jumped in the same spot and spammed the corpse of Minos with damage until he died. 3-1 was by far the most challenging level of Act 1. When you combine tricky platforming with difficult enemy arenas, you don't exactly get a good result. Nothing much happened during the Gabriel fight, so I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about healing. The main way of healing in ULTRAKILL is as simple as walking up to an enemy and hitting them. This is made significantly easier when we can both move around and aim our gun simultaneously. However, when we get rid of WASD, moving and aiming are mutually exclusive, which, as you could imagine, makes healing significantly more difficult. This is where my personal favorite weapon comes into play, the Screwdriver Rail Cannon. Aside from doing a lot of damage, the screwdriver creates a sort of bubble around an enemy that when stepped inside continuously heals you, which saved me a handful of times during the Gabriel fight. 4-1 introduces us to virtues. And the thing about virtues is that your location does not matter, and apparently neither does theirs. By themselves, virtues aren't much of a threat, but when you add in other enemies into the mix, they immediately become a high priority issue. I had a bit of trouble with this part considering all of the platforming, even dying once because of it, but despite that, the rest of the level went smoothly. 4-2 also went smoothly, only dying once in the blue path. The Insurrectionist fight is weird. For some, it can be pretty difficult, but for others, it's one of the easiest boss fights. For me, I personally fall in the latter category, because I knew that they had a massive weakness to fire. Though, with an overheat nail gun and a dual-wield power-up, I was able to absolutely disintegrate that man, holy shit. 4-3 did give me a bit of trouble. The level is dark and there are plenty of areas to fall, but despite that, I actually only died once here. Surprisingly, the rematch against V2 actually went better than the first time. Although V2 does have a few more attacks, the fundamentals still apply. There is one main thing of note here, that being whiplash.
He got whiplash. It was a really bad crash.
Whiplash is key for movement. Not only does it allow us to bring the enemies to us, but we can also bring us to the enemies. 5-1 was practically made for whiplash. The underwater aspect means that we can use the whiplash freely without having to worry about hard damage. 5-1 also introduces us to sentries. The main thing you need to know about sentries is that they're similar to virtues, except they require direct line of sight, are slower, but are also deadlier. The rest of 5-1 went smoothly and we move on to 5-2. 5-2 is by far the most challenging level when it comes to platforming. The platforms are very thin, and the water surrounding them is everywhere. So even one tiny mistake can get rid of half your health. I did get comboed to death, but other than that, the rest of the level went smoothly. Even the ferryman fight didn't have any problems due to the sheer power of saw traps. 5-3 went about the same as the rest of Wrath. There was a bit of tricky platforming, but the platforming is all indoors, meaning that there was no chance of death. Although I didn't use it much for the rest of the run, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention the rocket launcher. The rocket launcher gives us two means of moving around, rocket jumping and rocket riding. Rocket jumping is best used for getting short distances, and rocket riding is best used for traversing long distances without damaging your health. I didn't use the rocket launcher much throughout the run, because you can't move the rocket like you can normally, and there also isn't just that many areas where you can actually use the rocket launcher effectively. 5-4 is ridiculously easy. I spent almost twice as much time getting up to the Leviathan fight than actually fighting the Leviathan. With another P rank under my belt, I moved on to Heresy. Heresy is like Gluttony, but on steroids. There's more platforming, more enemies, and most importantly, more red. I died once in the final room, but other than that, there weren't that many problems. I expected the Gabriel rematch to be difficult. Hell, it took me 61 attempts to beat him on my first playthrough. But what I did not expect was that on this playthrough, I would beat him first try. The only reason I didn't get a P rank was because I took the time to do the platforming at the beginning of the level. Still riding off the high of that Gabriel fight, I went into violence with high expectations of myself. My expectations have never been shattered more in my life. I'm gonna start out violence by saying that, on average, I had about 16 minutes of footage per layer. Violence has over 40 minutes of footage. If only I knew the suffering that would befall me next. I died a few times throughout the level, but that's to be expected of any violence run. My main issue is with the Minotaur. Let me explain why the Minotaur fight is so horrible. See those carts? Those are the only safe spots to stand. And mind you, I'm using the term safe here very loosely. The Minotaur has two main attacks. One of them is an acid throw that covers a cart in acid. Pretty self-explanatory. The other attack is a hammer swing that will outright destroy one of the carts. This means that the fight is best played primarily in the air so that you don't get damaged. Do you remember what I said all the way back in Prelude about being mid-air?
My only way of moving mid-air is dashing.
I think it goes without saying that getting rid of our main way of moving mid-air in a fight played almost entirely in mid-air results in, suffice it to say, death. Oh, but there's still more problems. You see this red part? That is the only spot where you can actually damage the Minotaur, which, as you can imagine, makes healing pretty much impossible. The intended way of healing during the fight is that a stray will come on a replacement cart that you can then use to heal. The problem being, I couldn't live long enough to get to that part. This was where I realized something. If I couldn't live long enough, then I would just have to kill the Minotaur faster than it could kill me. Even with this glass cannon mindset, it still took a few attempts until I finally beat the Minotaur. After all of those trials and tribulations, I could finally move on. Nope! There's a second phase, baby! Thank absentee God that the Minotaur's second phase was significantly easier than the first phase. My problems with violence were far from over, because 7.2 introduces us to yet another problem enemy, the gutter tank. Let's just say that if you liked my rant about mind flayers, you're gonna love my rant about gutter tanks. While gutter tanks do have less health than mind flayers, they are much more annoying to deal with. The rocket launcher isn't hard to avoid normally, but when you restrict yourselves to mainly slides and dashes, it quickly becomes a big problem, especially with how much damage it deals per rocket. Speaking of damage, healing is another big issue with gutter tanks, because every time you try and get close to them, they will just sucker punch you right back to your last checkpoint. The wiki sums it up much better than I ever could. The screwdriver can help with healing, but their punch will just send you right back to where you started every time you get close. Not to mention, gutter tanks tend to spawn in groups, meaning you're not just facing one annoying gutter tank, you're facing multiple. And as a side note, let me just say that the level design is not doing me any favors. The areas where you fight gutter tanks consist of a box, a cramped box, and an even more cramped box. I decided to do some literal outside the box thinking by being outside of the square and just spamming damage at them until I eventually killed them. The archive gave me my fair share of trouble, but once I got past the free gutter tanks that spawn, it was pretty easy. In stark contrast to the rest of violence, 7-3 was actually pretty easy. Yes, there were some tough areas, but I've had enough experience with both this challenge and this game to where it wasn't that big of a deal. I was genuinely shocked when I got to the end of the level and realized that I had P-ranked it, considering how difficult violence had been up until this point. Also, can someone more experienced than me at this game tell me what happened to this swords machine? I genuinely have no idea. Let me explain to you my one major issue with 7.4. It all starts with a gutter tank. Near the beginning of 7.4, there's this one platforming area. The platforming, however, isn't the difficult part, but rather what comes after. There's this small metal platform after the platforming that, when stepped on, spawns a gutter tank. But that's not even the worst part. My main issue is with checkpoints. There are absolutely 0 checkpoints before the gutter tank. This means that if I were to die at this part, I would have to redo the entire level. This one gutter tank cost me 6 minutes of my life that I am never getting back. In a weird twist of fate, though, once I finally got past the gutter tank, the rest of the level's actually not that bad. I'm not saying that it's easy, but it's definitely much better than the gutter tank. I made my way through the rest of the level, blew up the earth mover, and proved that yes, you can beat ULTRAKILL without WASD. Before the video ends, I'd just like to say thanks for all of the support on the previous videos. I'd also like to thank these lovely commenters for giving me the idea for this video, and to you for watching. If you want to see more content like this, then please make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you have any video ideas, leave those in the comments. And as always, have a good one.